Before all the pageantry and celebration and lights, and then the German influence of the tree and all of the solstice stuff and everything that it's become in Western capitalism, before all of that was this really simple idea, and I think it's still really beautiful. I absolutely love Christmas. I read this guy named Paul Ricoeur. He was a thinker and theologian and philosopher, and he had this thing called the surplus of meaning, and I've really bought into it. And I think that when you come to an evening like this, or he would say a symbol, like the communion table or something like that, but in this case, Christmas, there are so many layers and layers of meaning that have been added to it over the years that it has taken on this multifaceted depth dimension for which you and I, as much as we were to ever explore it, participate in the practices, and celebrate it together, to read in other cultures what it has come to mean, to go back and explore how the mystics experienced it, to read the early churches and their doctrines and decrees, we would never even come close to exhausting how fantastic Christmas is. Some people think Christmas is overdone, and to that I say bah humbug. I think we've barely scratched the surface of how good Christmas can be. We're satisfied with radio stations that switch from rock and roll to Christmas for a couple months, and lights in the mall, and a couple parades downtown, and some gifts that maybe we didn't even make ourselves or can't afford. And that's all great. Don't get me wrong, I love all that stuff too. But that's not the depth, right, of Christmas. One of the things I've been reflecting on this year is that last year we did an Advent reflection, and one of the final ones in the series was I asked the question, does it matter how God is birthed into the world? Does it matter? And I've thought about this all year, because something about that question was like a hook. It got me. And it got me thinking, I think it matters maybe more than anything else in the story. It might be the most important element in the narrative. Does it matter how the divine enters the world? Does it matter how the eternal is enfleshed? Does it matter how the transcendent, the divine, the eternal, God is embodied, and that the narrative of God's love is enacted, put into action? I think it is. And that's why incarnation has become such a deep, deep concept. But it's actually in the most basic reading of our Christmas story, or if you have a nativity scene, in the way we arrange the nativity scene. One of the important things, whether you read Matthew's gospel or Luke's gospel, or if you go to like a kid's pageant, you'll see a harmonized version where it's been dovetailed together. Or if you're playing around with the creche, the nativity scene, the art of understanding Christmas is to appreciate who's there, who's in the story. And I gotta be honest with you, this is a confession. When I start talking about the nativity scene or the Christmas story, I sort of get excitable, and I end up sounding a little bit like Stefan on Weekend Update describing the hottest nightclub in New York. It has everything. It has agricultural workers out in the fields. It has astronomers and theology professors. It has teenage moms. It has people who are well off enough to own an inn, and it has people who can't afford to stay there. It has young people and old people and everyone in between. It has relatives and strangers, immigrants and refugees. This story has everything. And the reason I find that so important, especially this year, is because we, on a night like this, get to say something truly profound, which is that all of those people who were of the right nationality and people who were foreigners from a faraway land, people who were very religious and people who were irreligious, folks who had lots of money and folks who didn't have a lot of money, folks who had education and folks that were uneducated, folks that had high standing in society and those who society turned a crooked eye at, wanted to keep their distance. All of them are a part of this story. And I don't think it's a reach for us to take from that the possible application that that's true of us as well. That though we weren't there that first night, then on a night like tonight, we find ourselves in God's story. That no matter what season of life you find yourself in, if you are a student, if you're looking for a job, if you're considering a career change, if you're retired, whether you have kids of your own or not, like me, if you have grandkids and great-grandkids, you're a part of God's story. How God comes into the world, you're a part of that story about embodied divinity, about the eternal being enfleshed, about this gospel of God's love for all people to be enacted, put into action. You are part of the incarnation, how God makes God's self known in the world. And it gives me great joy that no matter who I meet, I know that they are a part of God's story and that God is revealing the beauty of all creation for the ages that are to come and the road that the ancients walked. That there is something profound. The Greeks called it Sophia, it's wisdom. And she is telling her story, the divine story, in and through even people like us. The great part about it is it has nothing to do with our resume or our diploma or our bank statement or a credit card statement. It has nothing to do with the kind of car we drive or how tall we are or if other people think we're good looking or how many likes we get on social media. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's all by God's grace, which is the gift. It comes from the word charis, from which we get charity, charis. It's translated gift or grace. So in the giving of gifts at Christmas, it's part of how we remind each other, how we perform or rehearse that we have been given a gift. The gift of being invited into and adopted into this story. If you're here tonight and you're feeling lonely maybe, or struggling with depression, or trying to fight an addiction, maybe you regret some of the choices you made this year, or maybe you're having a tough time with your family, I just want you to know, it doesn't disqualify you. In fact, the unfortunate thing to some of us is it makes us all the more qualified, because where there is less of us, there is the possibility of being filled to a greater extent with this good news. So I love the Christmas story. I love that it involves people of multiple nationalities, multiple religions, multiple genders, multiple generations, multiple economic incomes, multiple education levels, multiple statuses inside society. And they all are a part of the story. It makes me think that each of us is a part of God's story.